Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Terry Fletcher.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Terry Fletcher. This is the What the Football WTF Week 6. And boy, let's get started. Well, let's start with Thursday Night Football. Tampa Bay beats Philly again, 28-22. But I think the probably the funniest part of that game, if you can call it funny, he is one of my 4 leagues of fantasy, one of my quarterbacks. But Brady had 3 rushing yards, but he takes a knee at the 5-yard line at the end and lost a yard, so he didn't cover bets on what he'd have. Also, he didn't cover the spread because they were right there in the end zone. We do that as far as the Steelers all the time. If you can win the game, they just take a knee. They're like, why chance a fumble? So some haters on Brady this week. I saw it all over Twitter and all over social media. But of course, all they care about is the win, which is what they should. So this is week 2 of football in London. And it was, of course, the game everybody wanted to see. I'm kidding. The 1-4 Dolphins against the 0-5 Jaguars. Well, remember, the Jacksonville Jaguars, they have lost 20 straight games. And so to fly all the way to London and then hopefully win is kind of scary for them. Well, guess what? They did win. So they won finally. They 1-5 Jags, and you would have thought they won the Super Bowl. But after 20 straight losses, I'm telling you, for those of you that listen to this podcast and you are, I guess, what you call yinsers, Pittsburghers and everything, you really have to appreciate what we have in Pittsburgh with our Steelers because it is crazy. Can you imagine going 20 straight losses? What the football? So we did hear a voice from the past, though, in the booth. Former Jets quarterback Mark Sanchez is now in the booth, and he actually did a decent job, but I thought that was like, oh, who is that? There's somebody that came out of the past. So Rams beat Giants 38-11, which really makes Sean McVay look like a genius. He traded for Matthew Stafford plus a pick to Detroit, sent Jared Goff to the Lions, and they're 0-6, by the way. And coach called him out, even saying that, Goff has to be better. He has too many interceptions, a ton of fumbles. He's always fumbling. I remember talking to somebody who wanted to do a parlay, and they're like, well, I need a low-cost quarterback. How about Goff? I'm like, no. He usually gets negative points or he's just terrible. And I was right again. He had less than 10. But since he beat Detroit 34-11, not excited about an AFC North team going to a good 4-2, but what are you going to do? With the Raiders' mess this week, what did we think was going to happen? Well, the distractions, Gruden losing his job, being forced to resign. Who knew what was going to happen with them? But they beat the Broncos 34-24, so good for them. I'm not a Raider fan at all. Obviously, as a Steeler fan, we never would be. But you have to appreciate the fact that those players, it's not their fault. So at least the fact that they, pulled it together at the end. Now let's hope they keep losing. Isn't that mean? What the football, Terry? What can you say to that? One of the things I noticed this weekend, and you had to notice it as well in the football, is these young coaches who are coaching teams, they're just being really stupid. Now, some people call them aggressive. I just call it stupidity. Early in games, on 4th down, going for it when you're behind, when instead of taking the points when you need them, they're doing it in the 2nd quarter, in the 3rd quarter. I get it towards the end where you're in a hurry to get some points, but Cleveland versus Arizona, they're 4 and 3. Okay, so 4th down, 3 yards to go at the 15. And take the points. No, Mayfield was sacked. Come on. And 3rd quarter in Chargers. Okay, this one made no sense to me. Went forward on 4th and 1 at their own 19. So yes, that's the other team. All they had to do was run it in, or they're already in field goal range. And they were playing the Ravens. Ravens took over and scored. But, WTF, why would you do that in the 3rd quarter? You're playing terrible. That just doesn't make sense to me. There were a lot of bad snaps. I think 3 in that game. Late snaps, lost snaps, a dropped snap. The Chargers are really a mess right now. And if you had any what the football moments, it was being watching the Chargers game. 3 seconds left in the first half, and Mayfield did throw a Hail Mary for a touchdown, and you're like, oh my gosh, somebody sat on them and didn't realize what was going on. So that was probably the highlight of that game, but Arizona turned out and beat Cleveland anyway. And right now, Arizona is the only undefeated team at 6-0, so good for them. I really like their quarterback, so you can't really be, and they're in the NFC, so we don't have to see them, so it's for a while. KC was behind in their game. So Kansas City, they're playing kind of terrible right now. Everybody's saying now that Josh Allen is better than Mahomes. And I mean, Mahomes was paid how much? $500 million. He's a $500 million man. And they were behind again in this game, 10-13. And he's thrown 14 interceptions in 14 starts. So let's shift what people like to say about Big Ben, and let's focus on a player who is making a gazillion amount of money, and he needs to figure it out. And I don't know if it's his offensive line or if they just have this arrogance about them saying, well, we're Kansas City, so don't you know who we are? But they still won 31-13 versus the Washington football team. They held them in the second half, but they really don't come out looking great. So that's going to be tough for them. And when you see them down, when you're watching other games, you're like, Kansas City's down. But it'll be interesting to see what happens to them during the year. But they're not the team to beat, in my opinion, in the AFC. Now, what about Aaron Rodgers? Well, he is, oh my gosh, this guy is so arrogant. And I'm so tired of seeing Pittsburghers saying, oh, he's going to be in a uniform in Pittsburgh next season. I mean, everybody realized that he is only 2 years younger than Ben, and it's actually like 19 months. So Ben is 39. He is 37. He's going to be 38 in December. And why would we pay that kind of money for a year? I mean, that's really all he would be worth to us, and what he did in the offseason trying to get rid of his general manager. So he goes into Chicago and he wins the game. I mean, his team wins the game. They were down a little bit, came back and won it 24-14. But he goes into the crowd and it was caught on TV, and I effing own you. And then several different times, I own you. It was all on TV. And you wonder, isn't that taunting? How many taunting calls were we getting? Well, we actually got a clarification on that. You can taunt the audience, but you can't taunt the player. But we're going to get into taunting here in a little bit because, okay, so you can taunt the audience. You can show what a jerk you are on TV, which, okay, in the moment of the celebration, whatever. But, I mean, come on, he drives me crazy. But he also gets special treatment. So as we know, so you don't know if it was that the refs just didn't want to call it, or again, he didn't do it to a player, he did it to the audience and to the people that were in the stadium, or if it's just because it's Aaron Rodgers. Did you see what happened in the Brady game? Let's go back to that for a minute. So Tom Brady's in the backfield. It's live football. There's actually live football going on, and him and another player are rubbing up against each other for something. And the ref comes in instead of watching what's going on with the plays in the game to kind of break it up and protect Brady. You don't do that while the play's going on. You do not do that as a referee. And so that was kind of a big deal as well. Talk about more what the football. And I'm always picking on refs because they always deserve it. They mentioned on Monday Night Football that a lot of our referees now are kids of the children of the former referees who've retired. And we now have a second generation of terrible referees. What the heck? Or, as we should say here, what the football? So Dallas at New England, back and forth for as far as who was winning, who was losing. Score kept changing. And with 2 minutes left, Mac Jones ahead by 1, throws an interception to his college teammate, defensive back Diggs, who he's a great cornerback. But Dallas fails on a 2-point conversion, and 1 minute later he throws to Higbee for a touchdown. And now New England leads by 3. Dallas in overtime. But CeeDee Lamb, he gets a touchdown. Dallas wins 35-29. But here's another taunting. As he's running in the touchdown, he's waving and turning around and doing that high step kick to a player that's in there, and they don't call it. Isn't that taunting? He did it to a player. So the things they're calling taunting on, it's almost like they're saying, well, you can celebrate and be a jerk, but you can't stand over a player. You can't at a sideline during the game. So I don't understand where the taunting thing is. We need a clarification. This reminds me of when you used to be able to review pass interference. Well, I'm glad that stopped because right now you don't know what's going on. But it's crazy to me that your judgment call on who's being a brat. That's what taunting is. You got a little boy being a brat, and you have one maybe older referee saying, no, you're being too bratty, and another one saying, oh, just let him play. This is football. So I think that's a problem because there's not black and white on that. Okay, I'm going to start on the Steelers game. The first half, we come out with a 14-0 lead. I mean, I was very excited, very happy, thinking, okay, this is good. And let's face it, they have Geno Smith starting. We don't have Russell Wilson, but the defensive side of Seattle is nothing to sleep on. So the fact that we were able to do that is pretty impressive. But then they come out the second half, and I don't know if you caught it with the announcers, but they said something to the effect that Mike Tomlin had said and our coaches had said that they're going to be throwing to Lockett and Metcalf, so we better be ready for that. Well, they didn't do that. They came out and stuck with the run, stuck with Collins because their regular running back was out, Carson, and so they just ran down the field. I mean, we could not stop them. We could not make a tackle. And I don't know about you guys, but how many times were we screaming, make a freaking tackle? I mean, they were not making tackles at all. It was really quite embarrassing. So we let them back into it. They get back into it, and we're 17-17. Now, we had a couple of hiccups in our game as well. Ben had, I don't know, for those of you that are younger listening to this, there was something in 2001 called the Tuck Rule. And it was a snowy Raider game that Tom Brady, this is when he came out and won his Super Bowl. It was an AFC championship, Patriots and Raiders. And he went to make a pass like Ben did where he kept the ball, but as it was motioning downward, it came out of his hand. But back then, it was that he was trying to tuck it under and they let him have it as not a fumble. Well, that rule went away after John Madden, who was the coach of the Raiders at the time, threw a holy fit about that and said he's pulling it back to his body, but the ball came out. And so it should have been a fumble. So they called the fumble on Ben. We were kind of freaking out at that point. But our defense holds them to a 3-and-out. I mean, they just came out and said, okay, you know what? We have your back. So I hope Ben came over and gave his defense a big hug. Boswell's perfect on field goals. And it was great. But here's what happened. So all hell breaks loose at the end of the game clock. Seattle runs out of time. It's out of time on the game clock, the stadium clock, but the refs stopped the clock to review a catch, no catch when it was fumbled, and it was clear it was a catch. It was fumbled, and they have no time to spike. It would be in 1 second or 0 seconds. They give them 3 seconds back on the clock. I mean, why don't you just hand them the ball and say, here, just toss it over the uprights? I mean, it was just so ridiculous because a couple of plays earlier, I don't know if you caught this, but Metcalf makes a juggling catch to the side that might have been overturned if they looked at it because he didn't have control, but no review. And this was a clear as day catch and fumble with Seahawks in field goal range with seconds left. That was just pathetic. It was absolutely pathetic. And you want to talk about Tomlin just completely pissed. He was, you could read his lips on the sideline and make no mistake what he was saying. But he was just like so mad. And then in his presser, it was heard that on the way to his post-game press conference, he said, I got my wallet because he said it was wrong. He was really upset. It was an embarrassment, and it was. It was absolutely ridiculous. And for those of you that don't know what Tomlin does within the league, is because he seems to know everything about every team, he's on the competition committee. So if you don't think that he's going to mention this, or if you think that's the last that we've heard of that just because we won, I guarantee you it isn't. It will definitely be brought up in that because that was just wrong. I wish those of us as fans could actually hear that front office call about that, because I would really like to see what the front office in New York and all of them have to say about that. That was just absolutely wrong. But a little lighter thing, I don't know if you caught this, something Tomlin said at the presser after, and actually I agreed with him. TJ Watt, oh, what a beast. He forces a fumble, sets up a 51-yard field goal. Boswell's perfect. We win in overtime, right? But who really was one of our players of the game? How about Presley Harvin? I mean, the way he makes that ball, he holds those balls for Boswell, his punts. I mean, he's such a pickup that we drafted as a punter. But Tomlin says, and I'll quote, young Presley holding those balls in big moments. That was just funny to me, but you know what? It's true, holding those balls in big moments. So just so you know, the week 7 is going to be tough for those of us who play fantasy. And again, you know I do. I always mention it because 7 teams are on byes. And 6 teams, I'm sorry. So we have Steelers, Bills, Vikings, Cowboys, Jags, and Chargers. I'm trying to pick up players that are good players, and they're on the teams that are on byes as well. So everyone, good luck with that. So lastly, talk about Monday Night Football. Well, that was quite the game as well. Buffalo at Tennessee. We beat Buffalo week 1, so of course we're interested in this game. It's also an AFC game. Diggs, Sanders, Beasley. Then you also have Henry for the other side. So they were trying to be tricky at first, and you could just see the coach when he was on the Tennessee side, Vrabel, when he was just looking into the TV, he was shaking his head going, what in the heck is my team doing? They were just not making things happen. But they were trying to do these passes. I think they were trying to do a backward lateral once somebody caught it for the punt or the kickoff instead of, just catching it and running. And the first time the guy went to look like he was going to throw it, and then he didn't. And you're like, okay, that was weird. But then the second time they did throw it, but it was a forward pass, and they need to not do that unless they know for a fact it's going backwards. But the Titans pulled it out in the last minute by stopping Josh Allen at the goal line, and because they went for it at 4-1 and they tried a quarterback sneak. And what's weird here is they could have gone for a field goal and tied it and gone into overtime. But instead, they decided to go for it 4th and 1 with the quarterback, and the Titans stopped them. And so they lost 31-34. And so that was just kind of bizarre at the end to me. But shout out to Derrick Henry. I have him in one of my leagues, one of my leagues as a running back. 130 plus rushing yards in 2 straight games with 3 touchdowns. He is a beast, and he's fast. You're looking at him and going, wait, he's like 240, 250, and he just runs like he is a gazelle. It's just crazy to me. But that was definitely a what the football Monday Night Football game. You're just thinking, what the heck is going on here? Especially with 2 4-1 teams. So the better team won, and in the big lights and on the big screen and prime time. So there you go. All right, everyone, that's it for me for What the Football Week 6. We have a bye coming up, but we will still have our What the Football Week 7 podcast. And so everyone, make it a great day and a great week. And thank you for listening to the Steel City Underground podcast.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.